Admiral Krellex stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars bend and twist as his massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Behind him stretched the most powerful armada in galactic history, 9,900 warships of the Vorthek Empire. Each vessel bristled with plasma cannons and energy shields that could withstand the force of a small star. The Admiral's 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he surveyed his fleet through the VIEWPOR2. Commander Vex approached. From the tactical station, his scaled skin reflecting the blue light of the navigation displays. The younger officer carried a data pad containing intelligence reports about their target. "Admiral, our scouts confirm the human settlements are exactly as predicted," he said, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never known. "Defeat. They have scattered colonies across only 7 star systems, minimal defense stations, and their largest military installation appears to be around their homeworld." Krellex nodded, his massive frame casting a shadow across the bridge. The Vorthak had conquered 17 species before these humans, each victory easier than the last. The pattern was always the same: discover a new race, study their weaknesses, then overwhelm them with superior technology and numbers. "What about their fleet strength?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would be disappointing. "Perhaps 300 ships at most," Vex replied, checking his data pad. "Our intelligence suggests they use primitive kinetic weapons, solid projectiles fired from metal tubes. They have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, and their fastest ships can barely achieve half the speed of our slowest vessels. Admiral, this will be the easiest conquest in our empire's history." The bridge crew around them worked with practiced efficiency, their movements synchronized after years of serving together. Navigation Officer Track plotted their course toward the human home system, while communications specialist Yev monitored the fleet's coordination signals. Every Vorthek on the bridge had fought in at least 3 previous invasions, and none had ever retreated from battle. Commander Wraith, the youngest officer on the bridge, studied the tactical displays with interest. "Admiral, permission to ask a question?" he said, his voice betraying slight nervousness. When Krellex nodded, he continued. "Our previous conquests were against species that had developed energy weapons and shields. These humans seem even more primitive than the Kaleri, who at least had basic plasma technology. Why are we deploying our entire fleet against such a weak opponent?" Krellex's expression hardened slightly. "Because the High Command has decreed it," he said. "The humans occupy systems rich in rare minerals our empire needs for expansion. More importantly, they sit directly in the path of our next target, the Zarian Federation. We cannot risk leaving any potential threat behind our lines, no matter how small." The Admiral moved to the central command chair, his presence commanding immediate attention from the entire bridge crew. "Besides," he added, "the High Command wishes to send a message to the galaxy. If we can destroy an entire species with overwhelming force, other races will surrender without fighting. This demonstration will save us time and resources in future conquests." Vex returned to his station and began coordinating with the fleet's other commanders. Through the communication system, dozens of voices reported their readiness. Battlecruiser captains confirmed their weapons were charged and ready. Troop transport commanders reported their boarding parties were prepared for planetary assault. Support vessels indicated their shields were at full power and their repair bays were operational. "All ships report ready for combat operations," Vex announced. "Our advanced scouts have identified the human patrol routes and defensive positions. The first engagement should begin within 6 hours." Krellex activated the fleet-wide communication system, his voice carrying to every ship in the armada. "Warriors of the Vorthek Empire," he began, his tone filled with ceremonial authority. "Today we add another species to our conquest list. The humans have lived in ignorance of our power for too long. They will learn what happens to those who occupy space that rightfully belongs to the Empire. Show them no mercy, for they would show none to us if their positions were reversed." The response was immediate and thunderous. Across 9,900 ships, Vorthek warriors roared their approval. The sound echoed through the communication system, a wave of predatory excitement that seemed to make the very stars tremble. This was the moment they had trained for, lived for. The chance to prove their superiority over another species. As the fleet moved deeper into human space, the first contact came sooner than expected. 3 small human patrol ships appeared on the edge of their sensor range, tiny specks of metal against the vast darkness of space. The human vessels were so primitive that the Vorthic sensors had trouble distinguishing them from space debris. "Shall we hail them?" asked Communications Officer Yev. "No," Krelex replied coldly. "Let them see what real power looks like." The leading battle cruiser opened fire with its plasma cannons. Brilliant streams of superheated energy lanced across space, striking the first human ship. The vessel exploded instantly, its primitive hull offering no protection against weapons that could melt through reinforced battle armor. The second ship tried to flee, but Vorthak fighters caught it within moments, reducing it to scattered fragments. The third ship managed to send a brief transmission before it too was destroyed. "Pathetic," muttered Vex, watching the debris drift through space. "They didn't even return fire." "Because they couldn't," Wraith observed. "Their weapons probably couldn't penetrate our shields even if they had hit us." The fleet continued its advance, encountering more human patrol ships over the next several hours. Each engagement ended the same way: complete destruction of the human vessels without a single Vorthic casualty. The Admiral began to wonder if the High Command had perhaps overestimated the humans' potential threat. "Admiral," called Track from the navigation station, "we're approaching the outer edge of the human home system. Long-range sensors are picking up increased activity around the inner planets." Krelex studied the tactical display, noting the positions of human colonies and defensive installations. Everything appeared exactly as their intelligence had predicted. A few orbital platforms around the third planet, some mining stations in the asteroid belt, and a handful of ships moving between the inner worlds. It looked like a civilization that had barely expanded beyond its home world. "Begin the final approach," he commanded. "All ships to battle stations. We'll eliminate their outer defenses first, then move on to the planet itself." The Vorthic fleet spread into attack formation, their ships moving with deadly precision. Battle cruisers took the lead, their heavy weapons ready to blast through any resistance. Fighters deployed in protective screens around the larger vessels. Troop transports moved to the rear, ready to deploy ground forces once orbital resistance was eliminated. As they passed the 7th planet, something appeared on the long-range sensors that made Track pause. "Admiral," he said, his voice uncertain, "I'm detecting some unusual readings from the asteroid belt." "What kind of readings?" Krelex asked. "I'm not sure," Track replied, adjusting his instruments. "The asteroids appear to be moving, but that's impossible. They're just rocks." Vex joined Track at the sensor station, studying the displays with growing confusion. "The sensor data shows artificial structures within the asteroid field," he said. "But our intelligence reports indicated the humans only had a few mining stations there." Admiral Krelex felt the first stirring of unease. In 17 previous conquests, the enemy had never surprised them. Every species they had encountered was predictable, their technology and tactics easily understood and countered. But something about these sensor readings felt different, wrong somehow. "Continue the advance," he ordered, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "But increase sensor sweeps. I want to know what we're dealing with before we get too close." The massive Vorthak fleet moved deeper into the human system, unaware that every ship, every movement, every communication was being carefully monitored and recorded. In the asteroid belt ahead, ancient human installations came to life, their crews preparing for the battle they had trained for their entire lives. Captain Riley pressed her palm against the scanner and watched as the massive blast doors slid open with a deep rumble. The command center beyond was carved directly into the heart of asteroid designation TX-447, its walls lined with displays showing every corner of the solar system. Dozens of technicians worked at their stations, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of tactical screens that had been dark for 50 years. Status report, she said, moving to the central command platform where General Torres waited. The older man's weathered face showed no emotion as he watched the approaching alien fleet on the main display. Behind him, the asteroid's artificial gravity hummed quietly. One of the few luxuries they had allowed themselves in this hidden fortress. The Vorthak fleet has entered the outer system, Torres replied, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. 9,900 ships, just as our long-range scouts reported. They're maintaining standard attack formation, battle cruisers leading with fighter screens deployed. They have no idea what they're flying into. Riley nodded, taking her position at the tactical station. Around her, the command staff worked with quiet efficiency, their movements precise and practiced. These men and women had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment, studying every scrap of information about the Vorthak Empire, learning their tactics, their technology, their weaknesses. Perimeter sensors show they've destroyed 17 patrol ships, reported Commander Hayes from the communications station. All ships transmitted their final data bursts before destruction. The aliens are using standard plasma weapons, energy shields, and predictable attack patterns. Nothing we haven't seen before. Good, Torres said. Let them think we're helpless. The longer they believe that, the deeper into the trap they'll come. Dr. Elena Vasquez approached from the research section, carrying a datapad filled with technical specifications. Her team had worked for decades to understand alien technology, ever since the first Vorthak transmission had been intercepted by deep space monitoring stations. General, the countermeasures are ready, she said. We've identified 17 different ways to disrupt their energy shields and 43 methods to turn their own weapons against them. The main display showed the alien fleet moving steadily. Toward the inner system, their ships spread across millions of kilometers of space. To any observer, it would appear as an unstoppable force advancing against a helpless enemy. But Riley knew better. Every asteroid they passed, every piece of seemingly empty space, every drifting piece of debris was part of humanity's greatest military achievement. Initiate Protocol 7, Torres commanded. All stations report ready status. Across the asteroid belt, hundreds of hidden installations came to life. Asteroids that had drifted in space for centuries suddenly revealed their true nature, their surfaces sliding away to expose weapon systems that had been waiting in darkness. Mining stations that appeared abandoned began powering up fusion reactors that had been dormant for decades. Even the smallest pieces of debris revealed themselves to be sophisticated sensor platforms and communication relays. Station Alpha reports weapons armed and ready, came the first report. Station Beta confirms targeting systems online, followed another. Station Gamma requests permission to engage. Riley watched the reports flow in, each one representing years of careful preparation and engineering. The humans had taken every lesson learned from previous alien invasions of other species and applied them to their own defense. They had studied the Vorthak's tactics, their technology, their psychology, and had built their entire strategy around exploiting every weakness they could find. Remember, Torres announced over the fleet communication system, we're not just defending our home. We're sending a message to the galaxy. Any species that thinks humans are easy prey will learn otherwise today. The Vorthak fleet continued its advance, now only hours away from entering the asteroid field. Their sensors swept the area constantly, but the human installations remained invisible, their camouflage technology perfected over decades of development. The aliens saw only what humans wanted them to see, a sparse collection of rocks and abandoned mining equipment. General, called Lieutenant Marcus Webb from the tracking station. Lead elements of the alien fleet are approaching the outer marker. They're maintaining formation and speed. No indication they suspect anything, Torres smiled grimly. Then it's time to welcome them to our neighborhood. The first surprise came when the Vorthak fleet reached the coordinates they had identified as the location of human mining stations. Their sensors detected multiple structures, but when they moved to investigate, the buildings simply weren't there. Instead, the space around them erupted in explosions as hidden weapon platforms revealed themselves. "Contact!" shouted Hayes. "Alien ships are taking fire from automated defense systems. They're reporting multiple casualties." Riley watched the tactical display as red icons began disappearing from the alien formation. The Vorthak had walked directly into the first layer of humanity's defensive grid, a network of weapon platforms so well concealed that they were invisible until they opened fire. Each platform had been designed to fire once and destroy itself, ensuring the aliens couldn't locate and neutralize them. "Phase 2 activation," Torres ordered. "All mobile units, begin your approach." Across the asteroid belt, what appeared to be ordinary rocks began moving. These weren't natural asteroids, but carefully constructed weapons platforms, their surfaces covered with genuine rock and ice to mask their true nature. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a Vorthak battlecruiser, and there were thousands of them. The alien fleet found itself under attack from every direction. Weapons fire erupted from asteroids that had seemed lifeless moments before. Missiles launched from hidden silos carved into the rocks themselves. Most terrifying of all, the space around them seemed to come alive with threats that materialized from nowhere. "They're adapting," Webb reported. "The aliens are changing formation and increasing their shield power. They're trying to push through the field. Let them," Torres replied. "The deeper they go, the more dangerous it becomes." Riley activated the communication system to address the scattered human forces. "All units, this is command. The enemy is performing exactly as predicted. Continue with the plan, draw them deeper into the belt. Make them fight for every kilometer." The Vorthak fleet, now reduced to fewer than 9,000 ships, pressed forward into the asteroid field. Their commanders had recognized the threat, and were attempting to blast their way through, using their superior firepower to clear a path. But for every weapon platform they destroyed, 2 more revealed themselves. For every asteroid they blasted apart, another moved to take its place. "Sir," Vasquez reported, "we're receiving detailed scans of their technology as they fight. Every weapon they fire, every shield they raise, every communication they send is being recorded and analyzed. We're learning their capabilities in real time." This was the genius of humanity's strategy. They weren't just defending their home, they were conducting the largest intelligence-gathering operation in human history. Every alien ship that fired its weapons was revealing secrets that human scientists would use to develop countermeasures. Every shield that was raised was being studied for weaknesses that could be exploited. "Phase 3 preparation," Torres announced. "All ships prepare for mobile engagement. It's time to show them what human engineering can really do." Riley felt a surge of pride as she watched the displays. The human fleet was nothing like the primitive vessels the aliens expected. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt were ships that had been designed specifically to fight the Vorthak, vessels that incorporated every lesson learned from studying alien technology. They were faster, more maneuverable, and more deadly than anything the aliens had encountered. "General," Hayes called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the alien fleet. They're trying to communicate with us." "Put it through," Torres said. The main display flickered, showing the image of a Vorthak commander. The alien's 4 eyes were wide with what might have been fear or rage. "Unknown defenders," the alien said. "We are the Vorthak Empire. Cease your resistance immediately and surrender your system, or we will destroy every living thing in this region of space." Torres stepped forward, his face grim. "This is General Torres of the Human Defense Force. You came here to conquer and destroy us. Instead, you found something you weren't prepared for. We don't surrender, we don't retreat, and we don't forgive." The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in silence. Riley looked around at her fellow officers, seeing the same determination in their faces that she felt in her heart. They had spent their lives preparing for this moment, and now it was time to show the galaxy what humans were truly capable of. "All stations," Torres commanded, "commence full engagement. Let's teach these aliens why they should have stayed home." Sub-Commander Wraith watched in horror as another Vorthic battlecruiser exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The massive ship had been there one moment, its shields glowing blue with protective energy, and the next moment it was nothing but expanding debris and superheated gas. Around him, the bridge crew of the flagship worked frantically at their stations, their earlier confidence replaced by desperate concentration. "Report!" Admiral Krellex demanded, his voice carrying an edge of fear that none of them had ever heard before. The proud commander who had led them into this system now stood hunched over the tactical display, his 4 eyes darting between the hundreds of red warning indicators that covered the screen. "We've lost over 3,000 ships," Commander Vex replied, his scaled hands shaking as he read the casualty reports. "The humans have turned the entire asteroid belt into a weapons platform. Every rock, every piece of debris, every abandoned station is attacking us. Our senses can't distinguish between real asteroids and their weapons until they open fire." Wraith studied the sensor readings, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The human tactics were unlike anything in their military databases. Instead of meeting the Vorthek fleet in open battle, they had created a maze of hidden threats that struck from ambush and disappeared before return fire could be directed at them. "Admiral," he said hesitantly, "I think we may have underestimated their intelligence capabilities." "Impossible," Krellex snapped. "They're a primitive species with basic technology. They can't possibly coordinate an attack of this magnitude." But even as he spoke, the evidence mounted against his words. The human attacks were perfectly timed, striking at exactly the moment when Vorthic shields were weakest. Their weapons seemed designed specifically to exploit vulnerabilities in Vorthak technology. Most disturbing of all, they appeared to know exactly where each alien ship would be before it arrived there. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the battle from her laboratory. Deep within the asteroid TX-447, around her, banks of computers processed the incoming data streams, analyzing every aspect of the alien technology as it was revealed in combat. Her team had spent decades preparing for this moment, and now their careful planning was paying off in ways that exceeded their wildest hopes. "The alien shield generators operate on a rotating frequency," she reported to General Torres over the communication system. "They change their defensive harmonics every 47 seconds to prevent sustained attack. But there's a 2-second gap during the transition where they're completely vulnerable." "Understood," Torres replied. "All weapon platforms, adjust your firing patterns to match the shield rotation. Target the transition gaps." Across the asteroid belt, hundreds of hidden gun batteries received the updated targeting information. When the next wave of Vorthak ships entered their firing range, the human weapons waited for the precise moment when the alien shields flickered during their frequency change. The results were devastating. Ship after ship exploded as human projectiles found their mark during those brief moments of vulnerability. Colonel Marcus Webb piloted his fighter through the chaos of battle, his ship weaving between the massive alien vessels like a predator hunting among giants. The human fighters were smaller and less armored than their alien counterparts, but they were faster and more maneuverable. More importantly, they were flown by pilots who understood three-dimensional warfare in ways the aliens had never imagined. "Blue Squadron, form up on my position," he commanded over the communication system. "We're going to try something new." His squadron of 12 fighters accelerated toward a Vorthek battlecruiser, their approach vectors carefully calculated to avoid the ship's defensive weapons. Instead of attacking the heavily shielded hull, they targeted the external sensor arrays and communication equipment. Within minutes, the massive alien vessel was blind and deaf, unable to coordinate with the rest of its fleet. "All squadrons, repeat the Blue Squadron maneuver," came the order from Fleet Command. "Blind them before you kill them." Across the battlefield, human fighters swarmed the alien vessels like insects attacking giants. They couldn't match the raw firepower of the Vorthek ships, but they didn't need to. Instead, they used speed and precision to cripple the aliens' ability to fight effectively. Sensor arrays were destroyed, communication equipment was targeted, and weapon systems were disabled with surgical precision. Fleet Captain Next commanded one of the few remaining Vorthek battle groups, his ships limping through the asteroid field under constant attack. His vessel had lost most of its external sensors and was operating on backup power after a human torpedo had somehow penetrated his shields and detonated inside his engine room. Around him, his crew worked to maintain basic life support while fighting off wave after wave of human attackers. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving distress signals from 37 different ships. They're requesting immediate evacuation. Our casualties are approaching 60%. Nex felt something he had never experienced in decades of military service: genuine fear. The Vorthik Empire had built its reputation on overwhelming technological superiority, but these humans were demonstrating that intelligence and preparation could overcome raw power. They weren't just defending their system, they were systematically destroying the greatest military force in galactic history. "All ships, form defensive circles," he ordered. "Concentrate your shields and prepare for coordinated withdrawal. We need to get out of this death trap." But even as he gave the order, Nex realized the humans had anticipated this move. The moment his ships began to group together, the asteroids around them revealed new weapon systems. Instead of the small guns and missile launchers they had been using, massive plasma cannons emerged from concealed positions. These weapons were clearly built using captured Vorthek technology, but they had been modified in ways that made them even more deadly than the originals. Captain Riley watched the alien fleet's attempted withdrawal from her command post, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and grim determination. The first phase of the battle was proceeding exactly as planned, but she knew the hardest part was still to come. The aliens were learning, adapting their tactics, and trying to minimize their losses. Soon they would realize that their only hope of survival was to retreat from the system entirely. "General," she reported to Torres, "the alien fleet is attempting to regroup near the fourth planet. They're concentrating their remaining forces for a coordinated push toward the system's edge." "How many ships do they have left?" Torres asked. "Approximately 4,000, sir, all of them damaged to some degree. Their communication systems are disrupted, their sensor networks are compromised, and their morale appears to be broken." Torres nodded grimly. "Then it's time for Phase 4, signal all mobile units to begin the pursuit. Don't let them escape easily." Riley felt a chill run down her spine as she transmitted the order. Phase 4 was the most dangerous part of the human strategy, the moment when their hidden fleet would reveal itself and begin active pursuit of the retreating aliens. It was also the phase most likely to result in heavy human casualties, as their ships would be forced to engage the enemy in open combat across the asteroid belt. Launch bays that had been sealed for decades suddenly opened from hidden berths. Carved into the largest asteroids, human warships emerged into the battle. These vessels were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, their hulls black as space itself and their weapon systems designed using a combination of human ingenuity and captured alien technology. The human fleet was smaller than the remaining Vorthok force, numbering only about 800 ships. But each vessel had been built for a specific purpose: to hunt down and destroy alien warships. Their crews were volunteers who had trained their entire lives for this mission, and their ships carried weapons that had been designed to exploit every weakness in Vorthek technology. "All ships, this is Admiral Parker," came the voice over the fleet communication system. "Today we don't just defend our home. Today we send a message to the galaxy. Any species that threatens humanity will face the consequences. Begin the hunt." "Subcommander." Wraith looked up from his sensor display as new contacts appeared on the screen. The human fleet was emerging from hiding, their ships moving with deadly purpose toward the retreating Vorthak forces. He had studied the technical specifications of human technology, and he knew their ships were inferior to Vorthak vessels in almost every way. But somehow, watching them approach, he felt more afraid than he had at any point during the battle. "Admiral," he said quietly, "I think we're about to discover what these humans are really capable of." Admiral Krelek stared at the approaching human fleet, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Everything he had believed about human capabilities was being proven wrong. These weren't the primitive, helpless creatures his intelligence, reports had described. These were predators, and they had just revealed that the entire battle so far had been nothing more than the opening move in a much larger game. "All ships," he commanded, his voice heavy with the weight of impending defeat. "Prepare for combat. We're about to learn why the humans have been so confident." As the two fleets closed the distance between them, both sides knew that only one would survive the coming battle. The humans had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment, while the aliens were fighting far from home against an enemy they had never truly understood. The outcome was no longer in doubt, but the cost would be measured in ways that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Lieutenant Commander Hayes watched the tactical display from her position on the bridge of the human flagship, her fingers dancing across the communication console as she coordinated the final assault. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet determination, their faces illuminated by the red glow of combat lighting. After 12 hours of continuous battle, the end was finally in sight. "Admiral," she reported, "all pursuit groups are in position. The alien fleet has been reduced to fewer than 300 ships, all heavily damaged. Their defensive formation is collapsing." Admiral Parker nodded grimly as he studied the display. The Vorthek fleet that had entered the system with such arrogance was now little more than scattered debris and a handful of desperate survivors. The space around them was filled with the twisted wreckage of alien warships, their hulls torn open by weapons they had never imagined possible. "Begin the final phase," he commanded. "But remember, we need survivors. The galaxy needs to know what happened here." Across the human fleet, commanders received their final orders. The last phase of the battle would not be about destruction, but about sending a message. The few remaining Vorthak ships would be allowed to escape, but only after they had been marked in ways that would ensure their story would be believed. When they returned to their empire, Fleet Captain Nex felt his ship shudder as another human weapon struck their weakened shields. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically to maintain basic life support while the hull groaned under the stress of continuous combat. Of the 60 ships under his command at the beginning of the battle, only 7 remained operational, and all of them were too damaged to pose any real threat. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They're offering terms for surrender." Nex stared at the communication display, hardly believing what he was hearing. In the entire history of the Vorthek Empire, no enemy had ever been in a position to offer them terms of surrender. They were the conquerors, the dominant force in the galaxy, the species that other races feared and respected. But now trapped in a system far from home, they were being treated like the defeated remnants of a broken army. "Put it through," he said finally. The display flickered, showing the face of a human officer. The alien's features were softer than those of a Vorthek, but there was something in his eyes that spoke of absolute determination. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had just won a victory that would be remembered for generations. "This is Admiral Parker of the Human Defense Force," the alien said. "You have entered our system with the intent to conquer and destroy us. Your fleet has been defeated, your ships destroyed, and your mission has failed. We offer you one choice. Surrender now, and some of you will be allowed to return to your empire to deliver a message. Refuse, and you will all die here." Nex felt the weight of command pressing down on him as he considered the human's words. His training told him to fight to the death rather than accept the dishonor of surrender, but his responsibility to his surviving crew members demanded that he consider their lives as well. Around him, his officers waited for his decision, their faces reflecting the same mixture of fear and confusion that he felt. "What message?" he asked finally. Parker's expression didn't change. "That humanity is not prey. That any species that threatens us will face the consequences. That the galaxy has a new power, one that will not be intimidated or conquered." Commander Zek piloted his damaged fighter through the debris field that had once been the pride of the Vorthek Empire, his ship's sensors struggling to navigate through the wreckage of thousands of destroyed vessels. He had been a squadron leader at the beginning of the battle, commanding 12 of the Empire's finest pilots. Now he was alone, his ship barely functional, his weapons exhausted, and his will to fight completely broken, the human fleet surrounded. The few remaining Vorthak vessels like predators circling wounded prey. Their ships moved with deadly precision, their weapons trained on the aliens but not yet firing. They were waiting for something, and Zek realized with growing horror that they were waiting for surrender. All remaining Vorthak vessels came. The transmission from the human fleet, "You have 10 minutes to decide. Surrender and carry our message home or be destroyed where you stand." Zek looked at his tactical display, counting the few red dots that represented the last survivors of the greatest military force in galactic history, 17 ships. Out of 9,900 that had entered the system, only 17 remained operational. The rest were either destroyed or too damaged to ever fight again. Dr. Ele Vasquez watched the final moments of the battle from her laboratory, her computers still processing the vast amounts of data that had been collected during the engagement. Her team had accomplished something unprecedented. They had completely analyzed an alien military force during active combat, learning every secret of their technology and tactics. But more importantly, they had proven that human intelligence and creativity could overcome any technological advantage. "General Torres," she reported, "the final phase modifications are complete. The surviving alien ships have been tagged with our tracking devices. No matter where they go, we'll be able to follow them." Torres's response carried a note of satisfaction. "Excellent work, Doctor. When those ships return to their empire, they'll be carrying more than just our message. They'll be carrying our eyes and ears directly into the heart of alien space." The genius of the human strategy was finally revealed. The battle had never been about destroying every alien ship. It had been about learning everything possible about their technology, their tactics, and their home territories. The 17 survivors would return to their empire carrying not just news of their defeat, but also tracking devices that would allow humans to monitor Vorthak space and plan their next move. Admiral Krelek stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical display that showed the complete destruction of his fleet. The ship around him was a ruin, its hull breached in dozens of places, its weapon systems destroyed, its crew reduced to a handful of survivors. He had commanded the most powerful military force in galactic history, and he had led it to the most complete defeat any Vorthak commander had ever experienced. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "the humans are demanding our final answer, surrender or be destroyed." Krelek closed his 4 eyes, feeling the weight of failure crushing down on him. He had been chosen to lead this invasion because of his perfect record of victories, his understanding of alien psychology, his ability to inspire confidence in his subordinates. Now he would be remembered as the commander who had lost the entire Vorthak fleet to a species that their intelligence had dismissed as primitive and helpless. "Signal all remaining ships," he said finally. "We surrender. We will carry their message home." The response from the human fleet was immediate. The weapons that had been trained on the surviving Vorthak vessels powered down, though the ships themselves remained in position. Over the communication system came the voice of the human. "Admiral," his words carrying the weight of absolute victory. "Vorthak survivors, you will be escorted to the edge of our system and released. You will return to your empire and deliver this message. Humanity is not a conquest target. We are a predator species. Any alien force that enters our space with hostile intent will be destroyed. Any empire that threatens us will face retaliation. The galaxy has been warned." Commander Zek felt his ship shudder as human escort vessels moved into position around the 17 surviving Vorthak ships. The escort was clearly ceremonial, as the human fleet could have destroyed the remnants of the alien force at any moment. But there was something deeply disturbing about the way the human ships moved, like hunters allowing wounded prey to escape so they could track it back to its den. As the small convoy of survivors moved toward the edge of the system, Zek found himself staring back at the debris field that marked the grave of the Vorthek fleet. Somewhere in that expanding cloud of twisted metal and frozen atmosphere were the remains of 9,883 ships and their crews. The humans had accomplished something that no other species in galactic history had ever achieved. They had not just defeated the Vorthek Empire, they had humiliated it. The 17 surviving ships crossed the boundary of the human system and activated their hyperspace drives, beginning the long journey back to Vorthek space. Behind them, the human fleet watched their departure with satisfaction, knowing that they had done more than just defend their home. They had announced to the galaxy that a new power had emerged, one that would not be intimidated or conquered. Colonel Marcus Webb adjusted his fighter's trajectory as he led his squadron through the debris field that had once been a Vorthek battlecruiser. The human fleet had been engaged in active combat for 6 hours now, and the alien formation was beginning to show signs of complete breakdown. Ships that had once moved with military precision now fled in scattered groups, their commanders more concerned with survival than maintaining formation. "Wolf leader to all squadrons," he transmitted, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "The aliens are breaking formation near the 6th planet. Alpha and Beta groups move to intercept. Don't let them regroup." The human warships moved through space like hunting wolves, their black holes nearly invisible against the starfield. Each ship was crewed by volunteers who had grown up knowing this day would come, men and women who had trained their entire lives to fight an enemy that was technologically superior but lacked the human capacity for creative warfare. Admiral Parker stood on the bridge of the flagship Retribution, watching the tactical display as his fleet systematically dismantled what remained of the Vorthek invasion force. The aliens still outnumbered his ships by nearly 4-1, but numbers meant nothing when the enemy had lost the will to fight. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements precise and deadly. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. "Alien fleet strength is down to approximately 2,000 ships," reported his tactical officer. "Most are heavily damaged and attempting to reach the system's edge. Their communication systems are still disrupted, and they're having difficulty coordinating their withdrawal." Parker nodded, studying the patterns of alien movement on the display. The Vorthek were intelligent warriors, but they were fighting a type of warfare they had never encountered before. Their previous conquests had been straightforward affairs. Arrive with overwhelming force, destroy the enemy fleet in open battle, then occupy the defeated system. But humans had refused to play by those rules. "Commander Hayes," he said, turning to his communications officer, "signal the pursuit groups. Begin Phase 5. It's time to show them what happens when you threaten our home." "Lieutenant Commander." Hayes had been monitoring the alien communications since the battle began, listening to their increasingly desperate transmissions as they realized the magnitude of their situation. The Vorthek language was harsh and guttural, but the universal translator software had little difficulty interpreting their meaning. What she heard in their voices was something she had never expected to hear from the galaxy's most feared conquerors. "Terror, sir," she reported. "We're intercepting increasing numbers of distress calls from the alien fleet. They're requesting immediate evacuation from the system. Some of their commanders are discussing surrender." "Denied," Parker replied coldly. "They came here to destroy us. They don't get to leave just because they're losing." Fleet Captain Nex watched his tactical display with growing despair. As another of his escort ships disappeared in a ball of fire, the humans had revealed a new weapon system, projectiles that seemed to phase through his shields as if they didn't exist. His science officer had theorized that the humans were using some form of dimensional manipulation, but understanding the technology didn't help when he had no defense against it. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving evacuation requests from 17 different ships. They're requesting permission to abandon their vessels and escape in life pods." Nex felt his pride as a Vorthek warrior warring with his instinct for survival. His species had built their empire on the principle that retreat was dishonor, but continuing to fight seemed like nothing more than suicide. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders, their faces reflecting the same mixture of fear and confusion. That he felt, "Signal all remaining ships," he said finally. "Form up for coordinated withdrawal. We're leaving this system." But even as he gave the order, Nex knew the humans wouldn't let them go easily. The enemy had spent too much time and effort preparing this trap to allow its prey to escape. As his ships began to move toward the system's edge, human vessels appeared. From every direction, their weapons already charging for another attack. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the battle from her laboratory, her computers processing vast amounts of data about alien technology and tactics. Her team had learned more about the Vorthic Empire in the past 8 hours than human intelligence had discovered in 50 years of observation. Every alien ship that fired its weapons, every shield that was raised, every communication that was transmitted was being recorded and analyzed. "General Torres," she reported over the communication system, "we've identified critical weaknesses in their faster-than-light drive systems. If we can disrupt their hyperspace generators, we can prevent them from leaving the system entirely." Torres's response was immediate. "Transmit the targeting data to all ships. I want every alien vessel trapped in this system until we decide what to do with them." Across the human fleet, weapon systems were retargeted to focus on the alien hyperspace generators. The technology was complex and heavily shielded, but human engineers had developed specialized torpedoes designed to penetrate the most sensitive components. Within minutes, the first alien ships found themselves unable to jump to hyperspace. Trapped in the system where they had expected to find easy prey, Sub-Commander Wraith felt his ship shudder as another human torpedo struck their hyperspace generator. The explosion had been contained, but the damage was severe enough to prevent any attempt at faster-than-light travel. Around him, his crew worked frantically to repair the damage, but he knew their efforts were futile. The humans had deliberately targeted the most critical systems, ensuring that escape was impossible. "Admiral," he reported to Krelex, "our hyperspace drive is offline. We're trapped in the system until repairs can be completed." Krelex's response was a growl of rage and frustration. "How long for repairs?" "At least 12 hours, sir. Maybe more if the humans continue to target our engineering sections." The Admiral slammed his fist against the tactical display, causing the screen to flicker. In his long military career, he had never faced an enemy that seemed to anticipate his every move. The humans fought as if they had been studying Vorthak tactics for decades, exploiting weaknesses that even he hadn't been aware of. "All ships," he commanded, "form defensive positions around the repair vessels. We hold this position until the hyperspace drives are operational, then we retreat to Imperial space." But even as he gave the order, Krelex knew the humans wouldn't allow them to complete repairs unmolested. The enemy had demonstrated a level of strategic thinking that far exceeded anything in the Imperial military databases. They weren't just winning the battle, they were systematically destroying the most powerful fleet in galactic history. Captain Riley watched the alien fleet's attempted regrouping from her command post, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and grim determination. The Vorthak were finally beginning to understand that they had walked into a trap from which there was no easy escape. But she knew the most dangerous part of the battle was still to come. Trapped and desperate, the aliens might resort to tactics that could cause massive casualties among the human defenders. "All stations," she announced. "The enemy is attempting to establish a defensive perimeter around their damaged vessels. They're going to try to repair their hyperspace drives and escape the system. We cannot allow this to happen." Around her, the command staff worked with renewed intensity. The battle had been raging for over 8 hours, and fatigue was beginning to show on every face. But they all knew that this was the moment that would determine the outcome of the war. If the aliens escaped, they would return with reinforcements and better preparation. If they were trapped and destroyed, the message would resonate throughout the galaxy. "General Torres," she reported, "recommend we initiate the final phase of the operation. The aliens are contained and vulnerable. This is our best opportunity to end this permanently." Torres's response came immediately. "Agreed. Signal all units to begin the final assault. Today we don't just defend our home. Today we show the galaxy that humanity is not prey. The human fleet began to tighten its formation around the trapped alien vessels, their ships moving with deadly purpose. The Vorthak had superior individual firepower, but they were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and completely demoralized. More importantly, they were fighting an enemy that had spent decades preparing for this exact situation. Admiral Parker activated the fleet-wide communication system, his voice carrying to every human ship in the battle zone. All ships, this is your admiral. The aliens came here believing we were weak and helpless. They thought they could conquer us without consequence. Today we prove them wrong. Today we show them that threatening humanity has a price. Begin the final assault. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Human warships accelerated toward the alien defensive formation, their weapons charging for what everyone knew would be the decisive engagement of the battle. The Vorthak Empire had sent 9,900 ships to conquer humanity, but they were about to learn that some prey fights back with a ferocity that predators cannot imagine. Fleet Captain Nex sat in his command chair during the long journey home, reviewing the battle logs and trying to understand how his species had suffered such a complete defeat. The humans had used their technological inferiority as an advantage, developing tactics and weapons that no one in the Vorthak Empire had ever imagined. More disturbing, they had fought with a level of coordination and strategic thinking that suggested they had been preparing for this battle for decades. As his ship limped through hyperspace toward the Vorthak homeworlds, Nex realized that his species had made a fundamental error in their understanding of the galaxy. They had assumed that technological superiority was the only factor that mattered in warfare, but the humans had proven that intelligence, creativity, and sheer determination could overcome any advantage. The Vorthak Empire had ruled the galaxy through fear and overwhelming force, but now they would have to live with the knowledge that there was a species out there that was not afraid of them. The 17 ships that had escaped the human system carried more than just survivors back to the Vorthak Empire. They carried the news that the galaxy had changed, that humanity was no longer prey but predator, and that the age of easy conquest was over. Behind them, in the debris-filled space around the human homeworld, the humans were already building new ships and planning their next move. The invasion had ended, but the war was just beginning. Admiral Parker watched the alien survivors disappear into hyperspace from the bridge of his flagship, his expression thoughtful. The battle had been won, but he knew it was only the first engagement in a much larger conflict. The humans had proven they could defend themselves, but now they would have to prove they could take the fight to their enemies. All ships, he announced. Over the fleet communication system, begin recovery operations. We have work to do.